This man fell to Earth from space and died tragically. What sounds like a made-up internet legend really happened. Make sure you stay tuned until the end to see the incredible original footage. And if you like the video, I'd be galactically happy to get a thumbs up and a comment, because then we'll get the YouTube algorithm to show this video to even more people. Thank you very much and welcome. There are many tragic and absurd deaths. A man in Brazil died in 2013 when a cow crashed through his roof and crushed him. In the 15th century, a French duke drowned in a wine barrel after choosing this method himself when he was sentenced to death. Understandable, although I think I would have taken a keg full of Augustinian beer. But the incredible story of Vladimir Komarov is hard to beat. The year was 1967, 2 years before the first manned moon landing. The race for space, also known as the space race, was raging between the USA and the Soviet Union. Both countries were the first to attempt to gain supremacy in space and surpass the technological lead of the other. At the time, the Soviets initially had the advantage, as the Soviet Union had achieved a significant success in 1957 with the launch of Sputnik, the first artificial satellite. In 1961, Yuri Gagarin became the first person ever to reach space, followed by Alexei Leonov, who undertook the first spacewalk in 1965. However, the Americans were of course unable to take this lying down and very quickly caught up. Also in 1961, Alan Shepard became the first US astronaut to reach space. As the space race was so close and competitive, the Soviet Union stepped up its efforts and set itself the goal of completing the first manned, manually controlled spaceflight. In 1967, 6 years after Gagarin's historic success, the first manned test flight of the new Soviet spaceship Soyuz was to take place. The aim of the mission was to demonstrate the spacecraft's capabilities and to take a cosmonaut into orbit and safely back to Earth. Vladimir Komarov was selected as commander of the spacecraft and was tasked with controlling the spacecraft during the flight and testing various systems. This mission was incredibly important for the Soviets and was to be the decisive step towards gaining supremacy in space and overtaking the technological superiority of the USA in the space race. I've already spoiled a bit. It didn't quite work out. On April 23, 1967, the time had finally come. The Soyuz-1 spacecraft, with Vladimir Komarov on board, was launched into orbit. How can we imagine this spaceship? It was just under 7.5 meters long and had room for exactly one cosmonaut. It was equipped with a landing capsule that could be detached from the main body and was intended to bring the cosmonauts safely back to Earth. At the time, Soyuz-1 was the absolute spearhead of Soviet space technology. However, many technical problems arose during the first flight. There were difficulties with the orientation of the spacecraft and with the power supply, which of course is not good at all. There were also problems with the automatic control of the landing capsule. It was therefore decided to abort the flight prematurely and let Komarov land back on Earth ahead of schedule, using a detector system to align the spaceship for a braking maneuver. But you guessed it, the sensors didn't work and delivered contradictory data, so Komarov had to stay aloft. The maximum altitude he reached was not disclosed by the Soviets at the time. What we do know is that the Soyuz-1 mission was a suborbital flight, i.e., it did not enter a stable orbit around the Earth, but was only intended to be a short mission into space. Once into space and back, to test the new spacecraft, and above all, to demonstrate the cosmonauts' ability to manually control the spacecraft and return to Earth. According to estimates, the spaceship reached a maximum altitude of around 200 kilometers above the Earth's surface during the flight. I can already hear some of you saying that.
I always jump 200 kilometers in Fortnite, that's not in space.
Oh yes, it is. Space begins at the so-called Kármán line at an altitude of 100 kilometers. Vladimir Komarov was in space with the Soyuz-1 spaceship, if you trust the estimates. Before I tell you how it all went wrong, please let me know that you can help me a lot by liking the video so that we can cover even more exciting topics. And if you want to reward the effort, I'd be delighted if you gave me a thumbs up. Okay, so now back to Komarov. The disaster then continued to take its course, with the only remaining option being a manual landing procedure. We're talking about an immensely complex and super difficult maneuver here. Komarov managed to manually bring the spaceship into the correct position and manually ignite the brake engine shortly after crossing the equator over the Atlantic, making it possible to land in the Soviet Union in daylight. The communication between Komarov and ground control, where he incidentally spoke with Yuri Gagarin, is still preserved today. After the complicated manual maneuver, Komarov said, "The engine ran for 146 seconds, everything is normal. The engine worked for 146 seconds, the ship was properly aligned, everything is normal, I'm sitting in the middle seat, the seat belt is fastened." At this point, everything still looked quite good, but there was another serious problem during re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere. The heat shield of the landing capsule came loose. This led to an overheating problem and ultimately to the failure of the parachute system. Neither the main parachute nor the reserve false parachute opened. The spaceship crashed uncontrollably to Earth and hit the ground in Orenburg Oblast. Here you can see an original image of the destroyed Soyuz-1 spacecraft on the ground. The capsule hit the ground at a speed of 40 meters per second, and Vladimir Komarov tragically lost his life. General Nikolai Kamanin, who was on the scene, later wrote, "Cosmonaut Komarov was killed, the ship burned up, the ship's main parachute did not open and the reserve parachute did not fill with air. After the impact, the engines for the soft landing exploded and a fire broke out. It was only after excavation that we were able to find Komarov's body." There is a really bizarre shot of Soviet officers inspecting Komarov's remains after the crash. If you understandably don't want to see this, I'll give you a quick second to skip this part here. Okay, here's the picture, and it really makes you realize in one fell swoop the immense speeds and forces at work in space travel. Vladimir Komarov was the first person to die on a space mission. His death and the failure of the Soyuz-1 flight were of course hard blows for the Soviet space industry, but as macabre as it sounds, he saved 3 other cosmonauts from death. Another flight was to take place the next day. With the Soyuz-2A with 3 cosmonauts on board, as was discovered after the crash, Soyuz-2A had the same technical defects as Soyuz-1, especially the brake parachutes. If Soyuz-2A had taken off as planned, these 3 cosmonauts would probably also have died when the main parachute was activated. Komarov's phenomenal performance should also be remembered, as only a truly masterful pilot like him was able to perform the difficult maneuver for the manual landing procedure. He was not responsible for the failure of the parachutes. This must be blamed on the Soviet leadership, who wanted success in the space race at all costs and abandoned fundamental safety concerns. All available evidence shows that the Soyuz spacecraft was not yet ready for a manned flight in the spring of 1967. The design office had not successfully carried out a single fully automated flight before Komarov's launch, but this was a fundamental rule in the early years of space travel that was carelessly broken with a corresponding end result. This story is therefore a reminder of the dangers of space travel, the irresponsibility of the political leadership, and above all the courage shown by the first astronauts and cosmonauts in completing these life-threatening missions. A quick note to say that every subscriber helps me. If you like this video and curiously you haven't subscribed yet, or you know friends and family who are space enthusiasts, then I would be very happy if you could help me grow even more. Thanks guys. Let's stick to bizarre accidents in the Soviet Union, because there are quite a few. This one sounds too bizarre to be true. A physicist stuck his head into a particle accelerator and a high-energy proton beam shot through his brain. No joke, people. I'm not making these stories up. The incredible original footage and the information about what happened to this researcher can be found in the video below. Be sure to check it out. And if you want to support my work, treat yourself to the shirts from the videos, real meteorites, and fluffy plush planets in the space shop. Every purchase helps me a lot to continue running the channel. Otherwise, I would say, let's see the next video. Take care, guys.